Here's our latest show on the people, projects, and ideas of Braver Angels, the volunteer-led citizens group that's working to bring people together across rigid and often antagonistic divides. Too many of us are isolated from those who hold different views. Those divisions damage communities, disrupt families, and stop us from working together for the common good. I'm Richard Davies. I speak with Beth Malow and Doug Teschner on this show about their soon-to-be-published book, plus their breakthrough work for Braver Angels in New England. Both have a lot of passion for what they do.
People need ways to have more constructive relationships, and we've sort of lost that. I mean, it's a deeper issue than politics. Is how do we just be curious about people and have listening skills and things that are so basic to our humanity.
Both sides, when you sit down and you have coffee with them, they want to get along with each other. We Americans want to unite. I just feel that there are forces out there that are tearing us apart because that's what they see their profit and power in. And I think as Americans, we need to stand up and say enough is enough. We're better than this.
Our show is about fixes.
Yeah, how to make the world a better place.
How do we fix it?
How do we fix it?
If you're disturbed or really turned off by the rigid divisions in our politics, this may just be the show for you. In the next half hour, we'll put a little hope back into your political life. Imagine America where people of different social, geographical, and educational backgrounds, plus those with opposing political views, get along pretty well. Our two guests show how it can be done. Beth Malow leans blue, Doug Teschner leans red. He was a Republican state legislator in New Hampshire. Doug served as a Peace Corps country director in Ukraine and West Africa. Today, he volunteers for Braver Angels as New England political leader. Beth Malow is a neurology physician, science and health communicator, and trained volunteer and moderator, as well as debate chair for Braver Angels. Our interview began with this question for Doug. Why is it so important right now for Americans to be talking to one another?
You know, we've always had debate. We've always had disagreements. We've always had discussion. I think the concern now is it's been personalized. If you don't agree with me, that means you're evil or you're stupid. And this is really the concern we have. It's not about people disagreeing. Of course, people are going to disagree. People should disagree. But when we start to see people taking this sort of us versus them, they're evil, this is really, really dangerous for our country. And I think that's how we've gotten into this. And, I'm really just concerned about the future. What's going to be the future of this country and whether my grandchildren are going to enjoy the benefits of this country that I've had. So I think this is really probably the most critical issue we're facing right now. It's a deeper problem, too, of how declines and just how people treat each other. You know, we see more people giving people the finger on the highway. That used to be considered really socially unacceptable. Now it's almost gone mainstream.
Beth, how does that poison our individual relationships?
A deeper way to look at what Doug just said is that we have so many problems in this country, and we're only going to solve them if we work together. We're being divided in such a way that we can't work together to solve really fundamental problems, like practical problems, education, healthcare, transportation, anything. Not only is that not helpful in terms of moving our country forward, it also, as Doug says, erodes our relationships with each other as Americans. We're not united behind the cause of saying, hey, I feel differently than Doug. He's more conservative, I'm more liberal. Let's figure it out. Let's recognize that each of us has strengths that we can bring into the mix to make this work. Instead, I feel like we're being pulled apart and we're being demonized.
Is it fair to say that we are less divided by race and religion than we once were, but we're more divided politically?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think there's a lot of divisions going on, but politics has become such a core part of people's identity. And of course, we're also just geographically siloed, which really adds to the problem. People are only sort of connecting with people who think the same way they do, which is dangerous in itself.
Geographically siloed in what ways?
Well, I think if you look at the data, for instance, landslide counties across the country, there's many, many more now than there used to be. People have intentionally or otherwise have segregated geographically and tend to just live with and associate too, but live around people who have the very similar sort of political views. So we don't interact with the others. We don't get to know people. I think this is was really well identified first by Robert Putnam in his book Bowling Alone, how people are not part of like organizations where you would meet other people and you have different points of view. So, people aren't part of Rotary clubs and churches and civic organizations the way they used to be.
I wanted to add that I recently moved from Tennessee, which is a red state, to Vermont, which is more blue, and I'm in a very blue area of the state, and I see how easy it is to be in a silo. While when I was in Tennessee, through my job and through hobbies I had, like singing in a chorus, I interacted with a wide swath of people, not just of different races and religions, but of different political ideologies or identities. And that was incredible for me because it humanized people. Like you have to be around other people who are different than you to really understand that they're not evil, even if we turn on the news and we're being told that.
Beth, make the case, the positive case, for why it's so good for us to put aside our anger, our resentment at the other side, and be among people who see the world differently than we do.
Oh, it's huge. First of all, it feels good. When I'm with people who are different than me, including people who might have voted for Trump and are continuing to be quite supportive of his policies, I feel like I see humanity in a different way. Like people are working together, even if we feel differently, and they're not evil. That gives me a lot of hope. And then I think the idea that we can achieve so much more when you talk to people who have different views, like, for example, on abortion or climate change or guns, it makes me poke holes in my own arguments. And then I have to say, I need to be sharper. I need to think about this in a different way. We need everybody's view. We can't just talk to the people who agree with us because we're not going to learn anything and we're not going to be any smarter. I think for all those reasons, it's so important to have these groups of people that are not just diverse in terms of race, religion, socioeconomic, but also political ideology.
People need ways to have more constructive relationships, and we sort of lost that. I mean, it's a deeper issue than politics. Is how do we just be curious about people and have listening skills and things that are so basic to our humanity.
Doug and Beth, are you both from different political leanings? You have a red hat on as we do this interview, Doug, so I guess you lean right. How about you, Beth?
I lean blue. I have to say, though, part of being in Braver Angels and interacting with all the people I have, I've definitely shifted more. So I call myself more blue purple now. I've definitely shifted more to the middle, but I still think I'm on the blue side or the blue team.
I suppose we all shifted to the middle to some degree, but I had the experience. I represented a rural community in New Hampshire in the legislature for 12 years, Republican legislator. And I recently moved from that town 30 miles south. That was Haverhill, New Hampshire. And I moved 30 miles south to Lebanon, New Hampshire, which is close to Hanover. And it's fascinating to me when you go back and you look at the differences between the communities. You look at the demographics in that community. Haverhill was a really big agriculture town that's really struggled as the dairy has gone out, and a rural area. And Lebanon, on the other hand, you've got the college and you've got the hospital, and you've got 55% of the people have college degrees as opposed to 18% for Haverhill. The median income is much lower in Haverhill than it is in Lebanon. And lo and behold, people in Haverhill voted 60% for Trump. And down in Lebanon, where I live now, 30 miles away, they only voted 25% for Trump. But having lived in both places and seen people, I mean, there's a lot of good people in both communities. People are kind of in their geographic bubbles, like we're talking about.
Both of you have moved from politically more conservative areas to more liberal areas. How do both sides see each other in your personal experience? Do you find people you really like who are, say, Republican and view all liberals as being crazy? Do you meet liberals who think of conservatives as being just ignorant and bigoted?
I felt like that was probably the case when I read the newspaper or listened to different news channels. And then when I actually get into these groups, first of all, I'll start with the conservatives. I have great respect for my conservative friends, particularly the ones I left behind in Tennessee. I've had some terrific discussions. I remember talking with several evangelical Christian guys. They were younger than me, and we would be going out for a beer, and I would be explaining as a doctor my perspective on medically appropriate abortions. And they might not end up agreeing with me, but they were like, wow, I never thought of it that way. That makes sense, to maybe consider abortion as okay in certain medical appropriate cases. And then I would get together with another guy who was excited when I told him my husband had bought a gun and I was getting trained in guns. He just became my best friend and we could talk about all of that. So I have great respect for the conservatives. Now, I will say, moving up here, I've also have great respect for my liberal friends. They're very driven. They have big concerns about some of the things that are happening with our new administration and with cuts, particularly to government agencies and immigration and various other issues. And I respect them. And what I found is, like, Doug and I were actually asked to speak on a webinar with 750 activists. Many of them were part of, for example, the Indivisible group and other types of activist groups that are actively trying to resist the new administration. And to our delight, they wanted us to help them figure out how to talk to people who differed from them politically. And I was shocked. I was like, really? They really want us to teach them that? And they did. And they were very happy. And the reviews were quite good that we got. In other words, I think there's a hunger, even among activists who are really scared and frustrated by things the new administration is doing, which I totally get. They also see a need to talk with people who are different than them. And that's what gives us hope, is that both sides, when you sit down and you have coffee with them, they want to get along with each other. We Americans want to unite. I just feel that there are forces out there that are tearing us apart because that's what they see their profit and power in. And I think as Americans, we need to stand up and say enough is enough. We're better than this.
We have a graphic in our book of a crocodile trying to eat the American flag. And we think that that's very symbolic of this conflict entrepreneurs. These people are in it for their own benefit, but they're trying to divide us as Americans. And when people talk down, people are encouraged through social media or other means to denigrate people on the other side. It just feeds this beast. We know when people actually, talk to each other or they get into sort of constructive environments where they can engage, we have a lot more in common than people realize.
Doug Teschner and Beth Malow on How Do We Fix It? I'm Richard Davies. If you want to know more about Braver Angels, head to their website. There are local, regional, and often national events going on every day of the week across the country. Details at braverangels.org. You'll find more episodes about Braver Angels and Bridging Divides on our show page, which is at howdowefixit.me. Our interview continues in a moment. Doug, both of you are co-authors of a forthcoming book with an intriguing title, Beyond the Politics of Contempt: Practical Steps to Build Positive Relations in Divided Times. What's the book's main message?
Well, I think the main message is hope. People need hope. It doesn't have to be this way. And these are the steps you can take to make your life better, to improve your relationships. And if you want, help us build a better country. I think that there's a lot of frustration out there. I think there's a lot of worry, and there is a lot of hopelessness. But people are going to have to, we all have to educate ourselves a little more about how we're being manipulated and how we're being played. And we kind of lay out a whole bunch of ways that people can do that. We're very excited about it.
Well, let's walk through a few of those skills, a few of those ways of building greater self-awareness and looking at how our reactions can impact our own health and our well-being. Beth?
To me, one of the most practical steps is just understanding and identifying that you might even be a conflict enabler. In other words, somebody who's contributing to the conflict. I think that's really important for people to recognize. And once they recognize that, then I think we can give them the practical steps. The practical steps are, how do you have a conversation with somebody who's different than you? What do you focus on? What are your values? As a physician and researcher, I'm a science communicator, and I'm a big believer in how do you look critically at social media? How do you look critically at the literature? I use COVID as a lens for how we can become better consumers. So rather than saying to somebody, the experts think you should wear a mask or whatever the issue is, I instead say, how do you figure out for yourself what is best for you and your family? And that goes beyond public health to many other issues. And then one other area that we get into is this, we call it citizen-led solutions. It's very aligned with one of the Braver Angels focuses, which is how does a community come together, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, and create something. It's a very New England approach. It's one of the things that I love about being up here in New England is this idea of small groups of people making a huge difference in their communities. And how do you go about doing that?
Give me an example. Beyond themes, give me an example of one specific way where people can help mend broken ties.
Well, I think it has to start in your heart. I mean, this is fundamental to our book. You write down some things you're thinking about people on the other side of politics, and then sort of compare the list. Are your values consistent with how you're thinking about other people? And so I think it has to really start with that. We also really ask people to really kind of step back and see how we're being manipulated, how we're being played, how social media algorithms are. It's not just social media per se, but the algorithms like drive people to see more and more that that sort of reinforces their opinion. Resisting, making those quick comments on social media. And then there's other basic skills like listening skills. How do you engage with people in the spirit of curiosity? I think curiosity is a critical word to this. How do you become more curious about other people rather than just labeling them?
So many people feel utterly hopeless right now about the state of politics, especially people on the left, people who voted for Kamala Harris and got Trump. what I'm hearing from you is that by reaching out to other people who didn't vote the way you do or don't think the way you do, that's a way not of stoking hopelessness, but recovering hope.
Yes. Yes. If I can give a specific example, I'm very active in climate change. And one of the things that I did in Tennessee was talk to our Republican legislators about climate legislation. And many of the things we talked to them about passed. This was through a national organization called Citizens Climate Lobby. And what we did was we expressed gratitude to our legislators. We understood things from their point of view. We talked about, for example, economic security. We talked about job creation. For me as a physician, we talked about public health and pollution rather than polar bears. If you become a bridge builder, you can learn those skills. You recognize how important it is to talk to the other side, and then you can develop these practical skills. I'm a Brave Angels moderator, so I teach people in workshops how to use these skills. And they're incredibly effective because basically, let's say I'm talking to Doug and he's conservative, and I say to him, this is the argument that I feel I would make for why we need to do solar and wind. We need to create more jobs for New Hampshire and Vermont. We need to make sure that we have economic security as a country. And those will resonate him in a way that other issues might not. So being a bridge builder makes activism stronger.
It's the people on the extremes that are kind of driving the agenda. But when you ask the people on the extremes what they're trying to accomplish, it's like, do we want to vanquish the other side? I mean, how is that a strategy to vanquish the other side? We're saying, okay, why don't you try to broaden your side? Why don't you try to reach out to people on the other side? So if people want to demonstrate, that's fine. And I know that can be affirming when you get together with other people that feel the same way. But we would suggest this. If you see a counter demonstrator there, maybe at some point go have a chat with them, exchange phone numbers, and say, how would you like to go and let's have coffee? Not maybe right then, maybe the next day. And ask them about their family, about their background, not just politics. Where are they from? Well, how did they come to their political views? And share yours and show that humanity. And you know what? You might not convince them to come over to your side. And you may even be influenced by them in some way to learn a little bit that maybe there's some parts of what they think are maybe not as bad as you think.
It's Dale Carnegie's How Do You Win Friends and Influence People, really.
Yeah, and another thing is that both sides are not the majority. I mean, there is not a majority of progressives in this country. There is not a majority of pro-MAGA people in this country.
That's right.
So whatever side you're on, if you want to win, you have to engage people who don't see the world the same way you do.
Exactly.
If you want to build your coalition.
Exactly.
If you want to win and you want to also feel better in terms of your mental health, this is the one thing working on this book and doing Braver Angels workshops that's keeping me going in this pretty crazy, divisive time. It's incredible for my mental health.
Both of you have been part of a very concrete example about working together across divides. It involves elected state representatives, both Republicans and Democrats in New Hampshire. Tell us more about that.
Wow, that's a great, that's a long and very interesting story. I was in the legislature, and 3 years ago, when we were meeting in the early days of the New Hampshire Braver Angel work, one of our members, Travis Bapodi, said, "We got to work in the legislature." And I said, "Oh gosh, I don't know about that. I don't know." But he was so insistent, and I had been a former legislator, and there was another former legislator on the Democratic side who was involved, Patricia Higgins. So I reached out to the Speaker of the House. I knew him, and I talked to him, and I said, could we do a workshop? And he invited us, and this was in 2021. Bill Doherty from Brave Angels came out for the very first workshop we did. And there were 6 Democrats, 6 Republicans. And this was just sort of at the end of the COVID period. And The Democrats were all on one side of the room with masks, and the Republicans were all on the other side of the room. And I looked at this and said, "Oh my, I wonder how this is going to go." But when you get, it's the same principle we've been talking about. When you actually get people to sit down, talk to each other in a structured way, in a healthy way, people came out of that and they went, "Wow, we have a lot more in common than we realized." I heard it that day. And the problem, of course, people go back to their tribes and they say, "Well, why are you talking to them?" But we've done 6 workshops now for the legislators, and we've also done some where we've gone to the towns at the request of some of the legislators. And we do have a caucus, the Granite Bridge Legislative Alliance. Is it perfect? No, it's a roller coaster. I mean, and we were asking them to the focus of that caucus is relationship building. We're not trying to compromise. We're not trying to do kumbaya. We're not trying to agree. Just get to know each other.
And we're doing a debate, Richard, with a Braver Angels debate on May 20th in our alliance in New Hampshire. I'm chairing it. And we have several of the legislators coming. It's actually on funding educational initiatives within New Hampshire. So it's a local issue, and we're just trying to get everyone together, both sides.
Very divisive issue. And, Eric Turer, we went to his community. He asked us to come down there. We did a workshop in his town in the library. And, later he said, there were people in that room who hadn't talked to each other in years. And then about 6 months later, he sent me a video of it was a debate, I guess, a candidate debate in town. And the moderator of the debate said, "Gee, it seems like people are getting along better in town than they used to." And one woman got up and said, "Well, we had that Braver Angel workshop 6 months ago. I mean, I was having a hard time not crying when I heard that." I mean, so it's possible. There is hope. It's potential.
Beth, how does Braver Angels help you? I know you're a moderator for Braver Angels. Has that role and what you've learned from both Braver Angels and from the people you've been speaking with, has that helped you with this book and with your ideas about bringing people together?
Oh, absolutely. It's helped me in that I've internalized a lot of the principles of Braver Angels, because when you teach somebody as a moderator how to do it for themselves, you learn it better for yourself. I think the biggest skill I've learned is not to demonize other people and to really see them in a respectful way that we can all work together. And then the second biggest skill are the specific communication skills, the active listening, the not thinking about what you want to say next, the not getting, the gotcha moments, like saying, "No, I'm going to curiously listen and give somebody my full attention."
What Braver Angels has done for me, you're connecting with a community of people. You feel like so isolated sometimes with these issues. And, Braver Angels, you're finding other people that have similar concerns that you do. That's given me hope. Yes, it's given all the skills that Beth talked about. But I think, obviously, we would never be writing this book if it wasn't for Braver Angels and what we've learned through Braver Angels. But I was really looking for something. I was really hungry. And I think a lot of people are hungry, now, and hopefully they'll pick up our book and pick up some of these ideas and see it within themselves, what they can do. Maybe they'll join Braver Angels. Oh, there's other organizations too.
Doug is the biggest cheerleader you can ask for in a regional leader for New England. I'm so glad I'm here largely because of everything Doug is doing to inspire our region.
Well, thank you both for joining us here on How Do We Fix It?
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Richard, and thank you for the work you're doing and all of these efforts. Each in our own way, we're trying to contribute to this and ensure that our country it goes on for many, many future generations.
Thanks a lot. Doug Teschner with Beth Malow on How Do We Fix It? Beth mentioned an upcoming debate she's involved with. There's a link with details to that event on May 20th on our show page, howdowefixit.me. And if you like what you hear and want media training to boost your skills as a public speaker or simply need help with messaging and interview techniques, I'd be happy to help. I'm Richard Davies. Our website is howdowefixit.me. Our highly skilled and producer and sound designer is Miranda Schaefer. This show is a production of Davies Content. Thanks for listening.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group.